Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. You know, after all the stories we've had about creepy men and women trying to use D&D as a way to find their soulmate, I have to say, I kinda feel for these people. Gasp, you cry out in shock. How could you possibly sympathize with these people? After all the stories you've read about how badly flirting in D&D can go, how could you possibly— Look man, when the Latina short stack with dyed hair and piercings talks about how she'd like to wrestle the Goliath war chief into submission, my brain starts making chemicals. Sorry, but not really. Nerdy chicks are hot, and pretending like they aren't ain't gonna do nothing for nobody. Don't get it twisted though. I sympathize with, but I don't excuse the people who turn the game weird because of their romantic desires. I stand by the notion that D&D should not be treated like a dating app, especially if both parties aren't into it, because we stan romantic consent in these parts. But it'd be pretty disingenuous to act like no one's ever found wifey dearest while pretending to be a goblin. I mean, hell, two people met each other in my Patreon Discord server and have invited me to their f***ing wedding. Weirder things have happened. I'll concede D&D might be a good place to meet people and practice some social skills, but some nerdy Romeos out there really gotta take a step back and consider the consequences of their actions. The story I have for you today stars a player whose affections for another player both in and out of game leads to some conflict. And if you think that's bad, just wait until our antagonist sees that his object of affection is dating someone else from the group that's not him. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG horror stories. Enjoy. This week's story comes from Reddit user Quimey and is titled "Clingy Player Tries to Romance Another Player in and Out of Game, Gets Told No, and then Freaks Out when another player dates that same person." This is my very first post on Reddit, and English is definitely not my first language, so please don't mind if the grammar might be a bit off in some places. That's okay, OP, English isn't my first language either. My first language is idiot. I had quite a lot of things happening in a TTRPG that might earn the title of RPG Horror Story, but I wanted to start somewhere, so I will tell the most recent one. That story began when I was on a D&D Discord server for the second time. The first time is another, and in a way worse horror story, which I might tell later. Anyway, the friend who invited me to the first server tried to get me to play with her again and invited me to a way smaller server. The last one was a West March with over 100 plus people, and this one was around 20 people in total if I'm remembering it correctly. It was owned by a good friend of hers, and the atmosphere was way more personal, which was a great benefit for me. I was still more accustomed to playing with my friends at home. The rest of the group was already set up, and the GM scheduled a session 0 to give everyone a chance to get to know each other. I just knew the GM and my friend so far. Explain the setting to everyone and give them time to finish and present characters. So far, there was nothing to really complain about. Finally, the cast of this story, named after their classes. GM, guy in his late 20s, the game master and owner of the server, also an amazing storyteller. Paladin, woman in her early 20s, said friend that brought me here, shy but very friendly. Ranger, guy in his mid-20s, becomes very important in the story later. Rogue, guy in his late 20s, the brother of Ranger, was slightly important. Fighter, the youngest guy in the group, around 19 I think, and the problem player later on. And of course, me, also a guy in his mid-20s, playing a warlock. Everything was set up and we all met for the first time. The session 0 went really well, nobody had any issues with anyone, and all characters were very interesting. We also agreed on topics that we didn't want in the game, which for me includes any form of erotic roleplay and romance, at least with my character involved. You can imagine why I mentioned that. But to save time, I'm not going to explain everything, but bring it up if it does get important. The first sessions went pretty well, as we were set on a task to clear an area of monsters, and then help a group of settlers to build their own new town there. as well as protecting it later, which is a nice plot hook to get us all involved, and it was executed well. We were all having quite a bit of fun, but slowly things started showing up that were slightly annoying. Our fighter always insisted on looking basically like a Roman gladiator, wearing just enough clothing to be considered not naked, but so everyone could see around 90% of his skin at all times. He would also go into great detail describing how the muscles in his chiseled, muscular chest were working, and his tight black leather harness pressed against his wet skin, and all that stuff. So, yeah, he was basically describing how super hot his character looked while killing goblins, given he rolled for stats in chat with the GM. And he did have really good strength, dexterity, constitution, and charisma, but he was overdoing it quite a bit, sometimes to a degree that bordered on erotic roleplay. It was not that serious in raw game terms, but it was still annoying since his turns were taking way longer than necessary. After one late session, I jokingly asked him if he was authoring erotic stories, because his descriptions were quite nice. They actually were, but felt out of place in the story. Everyone laughed since the answer was yes, and I randomly found out that there were 3 gay men in this group: Fighter, Ranger, and myself, which will become important. This was a seemingly normal thing for Fighter, and I was told that I shouldn't think too much about it. I still asked if he could do it a bit less, because it was beginning to repeat itself and getting annoying. He promised to tone it down, and the next sessions were nearly free of erotic descriptions. But at the same time, his Fighter tried to get closer to my Warlock. It started with him talking way more to my character than before. Then he tried to be present at every scene my character was a part of. Finally, he tried to heroically protect him from all harm, like a real man should. And, from my point today, began to flirt with him, which I didn't understand. He also asked after every session where we would all be talking before going to bed, if he could talk with me alone afterwards. The first few times, I was okay with that. I enjoy talking to people, and as I found out, he didn't really have anyone to talk to. So he, of course, told me about nearly his whole life. Like how he was cheated on by other guys all the time, just because he wasn't hot enough. How everyone was just looking for the hot guys, and so on and so forth. He was not the most attractive guy. Calling it average sounds wrong, but I have no other way of putting it. But personally, I wouldn't consider that a problem. He did have some really strange ideas about relationships, and especially about where they begin. But the strangest thing was the way he used the term alpha to describe himself, which I just couldn't comprehend at the time. Now I do, as well as most of you. Of course, after all of that, he was still waiting for the right guy that he could share true love with and be happy with one another. All of this was a bit over the top from my point of view. So I tried to explain that he might need to get a bit more realistic with his expectations to actually get a boyfriend and not scare them off with his demands. Side note here, I wasn't applying to be a psychologist or boyfriend, and I kept my distance. None of the other players, excluding my friend and later Ranger, knew my actual name or anything important about me, and he was no exception. This made the next thing even more unexplainable. It went on like this for 2 weeks. We played 2 times a week, until he was getting a bit too pushy and I declined to talk to him alone again. And again, and again, because he wouldn't stop asking. While in the meantime, Ranger and I were actually becoming friends, and instead of talking along with a group, we would spend the night talking to each other. Fighter became increasingly frustrated, especially after Rogue accidentally dropped the fact that Ranger and I were seemingly getting closer. He became pushier about talking to me again, and his erotic descriptions began again, but this time in combination with the stuff that I mentioned above. This, in contrast to before, did hamper the story, because he seemingly wanted the whole story to be about him, and completely ignored the questline about disappearing settlers that the GM was building up. He didn't bother even when the plot was thrown in our face with the disappearance of Ranger's pet. He also started in-game to build a house for his Fighter and my Warlock. At that point, I finally got what he was all about, and I was planning to make it very clear that I had no interest in him whatsoever. not in-game or in real life. Then Ranger had the funny, but in hindsight slightly stupid, idea to get him to stop his descriptions another way. So the next session came around and I had my speech prepared. Fighter was late, so I couldn't do it before the session as I didn't want to delay it. Instead, I was planning to do it afterwards. The session was about to begin when Ranger turned on his camera, which he usually did. Though this time he was sitting in front of his laptop in an open uniform vest, in such a specific way that everyone could see too much of his muscular chest. I think he explained something about how the government not paying enough money for working air conditioning in the barracks, given we had 30 degrees Celsius. But he also noted that conveniently, Fighter could just point to his screen for us to get a picture of his character. He was exaggerating a lot, of course. He was good looking though, and the clear joke, he was nearly laughing the whole time, did not miss its goal. Everybody had a good laugh, and not even a minute later, the GM casually asked him to put on a shirt, which he did. I assume that was not the first time he did that. This also completely stopped Fighter from doing his usual descriptions, and the session went smooth again. We even managed to kill a boss, a gigantic spider thing, with no erotic statements. I asked after the session if I could talk with Fighter alone a moment, which he eagerly agreed to. He seemingly thought that we would get to talk again like before, but I made it clear that I'm going to explain something instead. So I told him in polite but very clear words what was bothering me about his playstyle, and that I'm not interested in him in such a way. Surprisingly, he took it well and said that he accepts that I'm not interested in him. He might have also said yet, but I'm not sure. So I presumed that everything was fine then. So we went back to the group chat and just said that we needed to sort some things out. Everyone went to bed happy with no bad feelings, at least I thought so. But I later realized that this event could be interpreted very differently in the later context, and this was very bad timing. So Ranger and I did our usual thing of talking until late. Things did change a bit between the two of us afterwards. Maybe it started with me complimenting him about his look and admitting that I'm really into uniforms, but it changed the tone into a new way. We never even talked about any of this ever before. A good month with really well-running sessions and a lot of private talking between the two of us later, and he and I agreed to meet in person in his city, and the first date did go well. The next day, Rogue asked in the group chat how everyone's Saturday had been, and Ranger, overlooking that this was the group chat, answered him quite truthfully that the two of us had a really wonderful day. Neither of us looked at the group chat afterwards for several hours, up until Rogue called Ranger, and then Ranger called me and told me to take a look at the chat. Well, take a guess what I saw. It started with Fighter asking us if he misunderstood something. Since we didn't answer him, Paladin, who didn't really think anything bad about that, told him, "Oh, they've been dating for quite a while and finally met each other in person." Technically wrong because we had just started dating. After a few minutes, he exploded on the two of us in the group chat. On Ranger because he was just a horny, stupid soldier who wanted nothing else than to get into every other guy's pants, taking away everyone's chances for a good relationship. And on me for leading him on, friend-zoning me, and keeping me around just in case it didn't work out with Ranger. Paladin, Rogue, and the GM definitely tried their very best to stop his text-based rampage, but as it seemingly went quiet in the group chat, he had just switched to the private chat with Ranger and me each. So now we were both looking at two massive castle walls of text in our private chats. We sent each other the screenshots. I could have never imagined that someone would get that angry about a relationship that he never had and was never going to have. I don't have the screenshots anymore, but it took me more than 10 screens to actually get the whole text screenshotted, and as I mentioned, that was just half of it. The accusations against me weren't that serious, and I just skimmed through the text, shaking my head in disbelief. He noted anytime we talked, and how he finally felt connected, accepted for the first time, and so on. It was melodramatic to the extreme, and he basically confessed his love for me. how I could have the audacity to completely ignore my feelings in this way and taunt me with another guy. As if I didn't talk to him way before I even started dating Ranger. And more importantly, since when was that any of his business? We didn't even know each other personally. But of course, he was the victim in all this, and we had denied him the chance to find a boyfriend. It was entirely our fault, and now we would need to apologize to him and break up immediately. Now, I'm very allergic to people with a victim complex, and even more so if they are trying to guilt trip me. So I made the right decision for myself and ended this story then and there. I just blocked him, sent the screenshots to GM, and told him that I'm not gonna play with that guy again, before muting the server for a while. So that's actually where this horror story ends for me. Likely because Fighter lost the one way he could contact me. The next part was what Ranger would tell me later, so it's a bit less detailed. Since I wasn't that close with the group, I could have just left. But Ranger thought that Fighter was his friend, so he gave him the chance to at least explain himself. I totally agreed with that specifically. Even though the texts for him were even worse than the ones for me, he talked with GM and Paladin about that, and they agreed that maybe if Fighter apologized and dropped out of the story itself, no one would be forced to pick sides, and an all-out fallout could be prevented. So the two tried to be neutral ambassadors and try to get Fighter to talk with Ranger. Hopes seemed to be high because Fighter agreed and stopped sending more aggressive texts to Ranger. The day arrived and they all met in the chat room. The first thing that Fighter asked when he entered the chat was if I was late. No idea why he thought I would be present too, as he was told by Paladin that I wouldn't be there and had declined talking to him ever again. Things went south immediately. No one told me what else happened in this talk. But later that day, Fighter forced everyone to pick a side by just throwing the conflict into the general chat. Accusations against Ranger were thrown around that were so serious that Ranger went straight to the police and reported them. Long story short, Fighter was thrown from the server and everyone blocked him, since he couldn't stop berating everyone to convince them to break contact with Ranger and me, because we were just such bad and egotistical people. But since everyone saw his tantrum, they asked us for the screenshots, and his lies had really short legs. After about a week, he had exhausted everyone's goodwill, and apparently nobody in the server was willing to tolerate him anymore. It took time until everything went back to normal, but eventually we restarted playing D&D, and the server also calmed down after a long discussion about who did what wrong. I wouldn't be stupid enough to assume that we did everything right. That's never the case. Ranger and I never were or became a couple. We became really good friends and continued meeting for about half a year, until Ranger met his later boyfriend. We played the story until its ending a month later, after which I could GM my own home stories again and left because of time issues. I lost contact with the group eventually, even with Ranger and Paladin. Though Ranger and I did talk again when I asked him if I could post this story, and he is now happily married with the guy he was dating. So, a happy ending I would say. Hope you enjoyed the story, and thanks for reading. Edit. Well, it turns out the story didn't end there. Wow, that was a lot. Normally this would be where I chip in with my own thoughts on the situation, but I need some time to process all this, if you'll all excuse me for a second. Larry, grab my gun. Drakey Poo needs to unwind.
A hunting trip? Since when are you into hunting? You don't even like going outside.
When I found out that the humans found a way to turn cold-blooded murder into a sport, I knew I had to give it a try. Plus, I like spending time with you, little buddy. You're like a son to me.
I'm 42.
Besides, how else am I gonna be able to mount Sasquatch's balls on my mantle?
Run that by me again?
Aw, come on. Everyone knows that Bigfoot is Manscaped's biggest and best customer.
I knew it! I knew this was gonna be a stupid ad!
Manscaped is trusted by 9 million men and 1 cryptid worldwide. And if that doesn't speak to their quality, I don't know what does. They just released their new hygiene bundle, the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. And inside it's the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Electric Trimmer. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra takes takes personal grooming to the next level with its dual skin-safe blade heads, which can cut through even Sasquatch's hair. It's tough on hair, gentle on skin. Once we take out Sasquatch, his performance package will be ours. Plus, those immaculately groomed Squatch nuts will make for a trophy that all the other YouTubers will be so jealous of.
What the f is wrong with you?
Your nuts are mine, Squatchy.
Drake, no! No. There is no way that you are that stupid.
You're right. Larry, go grab that for me.
Well, if it isn't the poacher I've been hearing so much about.
What? Oh, no. Larry was only kidding when he said he was gonna take your balls as a trophy.
What?
Quiet, you! I know you've come for the package I used to take care of my package. Now you're gonna pay.
Please don't kill us, Mr. Bigfoot.
Oh, I'm not gonna kill you. I'm gonna shave ya! You see, the Lawnmower 5.0 is equipped with a dual blade system. The trimmer blade with longer, wider, and rounded teeth cuts through hair with ease, and then the foil blade leaves you silky smooth. This puppy also is equipped with an LED light, so you know I'll be able to reach even the hardest to reach areas. Plus, with the Weed Whacker 2.0, not even your ear and nose hair is safe. You pathetic fools will be cursed to live a hairless existence.
I got some bad news for you, bud. We're both reptiles. Neither of us ever had any hair for you to shave.
Yeah, wait, what? So what the hell did you want the performance package for?
Bro, have you seen the stuff it comes with? These boxers have a ball pouch. Ball pouch.
No hair? If I can't shave you, how can I protect my performance package? I'm only a 1,000-pound ape with enough strength to rip the arms from a grown man. I'm defenseless.
Well, this went from terrifying to awkward really fast.
Yeah, I think it's time I whip out the big guns here. Hey, Bigfoot! Look, buddy, if you let us go, I can get you a deal on the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. All you gotta do is go to the link in my description and enter the promo code Den of the Drake to get 20% off your order, free international shipping, and 2 free gifts. That's 20% off, plus free shipping and 2 free gifts when you use code Den of the Drake at manscaped.com. Your balls will thank you.
Really? Oh, you're too kind, Mr. Dragon. Here, let me go ahead and get this unlocked for you.
Jesus! Larry, that was cold-blooded!
Well, of course I'm cold-blooded, Drake. We are both reptiles.
Are we still gonna...
Already on it.
Well, those are events that I wish I could scrub from the deepest wrinkles of my brain. How about we talk about the story before I start crying again, huh? I want to start by saying how much I appreciate OP's little line about how they're not stupid enough to assume that he and Ranger did everything right. That level of self-awareness is very lacking in a lot of Reddit stories, and I appreciate it when it does show up. Also, their English was better than most actual English speakers, but I doubt anyone is really surprised about that either. So, on to the actual topic at hand. I don't know if it's my own personal experiences talking here or what, but I can tell you that being one half of a fairy tale that exists entirely within someone else's mind is an odd feeling to say the least. You just end up there sitting and thinking to yourself, yeah, you know that happy ending where we ride off into the sunset and have like 12 kids together? Yeah, that doesn't sound like a very happy ending to me. Am I allowed to get a say in this? The reality is that a very small amount of people actually enjoy being put on a pedestal in the way that our fighter friend put OP up on one. It's not doing yourself any favors because it's setting yourself up for disappointment when the person you obsess over inevitably turns out to be a mere mortal. And it's super uncomfortable for the other person because they're now being held to an unattainable standard that they never volunteered to be held to. I know it's a super common trap for socially awkward people around Fighter's age to fall into, but all of my sympathy for Fighter goes out the window when he decided that he should try and take the deconstruction of his private fairy tale public. Having a crush on someone is one thing, but feeling entitled to a person is a completely different story. Someone whose first reaction to rejection is vengeance is not a person you want to have in your life. Like, we already knew that Fighter has some weird opinions about how a relationship is supposed to work, but that is some psych ward shit. While OP and Ranger didn't do everything right here, I mean, poking the bastard with a stick was probably a bad idea, there's really not anything you can do other than what was done here. OP asked Fighter to tone down the He-Man flexing, recorded their conversations with this guy so he could present the evidence in a clear and concise way that immediately showed that the Fighter was full of shit, and didn't let the whole ordeal sway him away from pursuing the relationship he actually wanted to pursue, even if it didn't work out in the end. The only thing I would really recommend would be making a more concerted effort in trying to be more direct with Fighter, saying, "Hey, I'm not sure if this was your intention, but I feel like you're sharing a lot of personal information with me. I think you're a great guy, but I'm not interested in pursuing anything beyond a friendly relationship with you." Or something similar early on may have gone a long way in this scenario. But I'm not dumb enough to believe that the direct approach would have guaranteed a peaceful resolution in dealing with a guy with a mindset like our Fighter friend here. In fact, part of me sincerely doubts it because, ladies and gentlemen, we have a part 2. Hello again, people. Again, English is definitely not my first language, so please don't mind if the grammar is a bit off in some places and if I'm using too many commas. Maybe some were as confused as I was when I found out that this story did not end where I thought it ended. Like I briefly mentioned in the first post, I reconnected with Fighter when I decided to write the main story down and post it. Well, you might be surprised by what happened next. So, a short recall of the important cast. Paladin, woman in her early 20s, a friend that brought me into the first story. Ranger, guy in his mid-20s, was the other target of hatred in the first story. Ranger's husband, Ranger's boyfriend at the end of the first story, now his husband. Fighter, youngest guy in the former group, 19. The problem in the first post, and this time again. And, well, not me, I'm just the narrator this time. Just a day ago, I met with Ranger and his husband, and we casually talked about what's happened over the last few years. Most of it was just small talk, though they did tell me that they really enjoyed reading the story, even if Ranger's husband said that he couldn't understand why Ranger tried talking to Fighter after everything that happened. He was also very curious about what happened back then and asked a lot of questions, because, of course, my post was just a summary and he wanted to know the whole story. Turns out he didn't know the story at all, and with that came the real surprise. So let's go back a bit in time. What Ranger didn't tell me back then, I don't know why, was that the Fighter did not end his crusade against him. I assumed that Fighter was still into me or had no way of contacting me after I blocked him, or both, which is why he focused all his anger on Ranger. Since he knew Ranger way longer, he had way more ways of contacting him, and Ranger couldn't sever all of them. So Fighter used that and a seemingly limitless amount of fake accounts to harass Ranger for months after the actual events. It slowed down over time though, until he only verbally attacked Ranger about once or twice a week. Ranger just commented, "Maybe I was just his way to vent for whenever he had a bad day." But he didn't bother to answer or read anything the Fighter sent. He also didn't block the accounts after the 10th one or so, since it wouldn't make the Fighter stop. He put all his accounts on social media on private though, and checked his friends list to see if Fighter was still around somewhere. That gave him some more peace, but he didn't care much anyway. Sadly, the police couldn't do much about it this time since he couldn't prove that this was the Fighter. At least the false accusations mentioned in the first post didn't go unpunished. This low-boiling conflict went on for half a year, which, if you remember, was the time that Ranger and his later husband became a couple, and we were about to end the D&D story. Ranger had no idea how Fighter came to know this, but only a day after he made it official that he had a boyfriend, Fighter came back with a barrage of verbal attacks against him over any possible channel. Still, Ranger chose to ignore all that, but I remember remember that he asked on the server back then if anyone was still in contact with the fighter. The answer was, of course, a general no, but I assume that someone was telling Fighter all this stuff. However he got the info, Fighter was seemingly fixated on spoiling Ranger's relationship and again tried to flood all of Ranger's accounts with hate speech. The accusations ranged from being just interested in one thing to being completely unfit for a functioning relationship. I admit I laughed at that moment because of the sheer irony. To straight up just accusations of crimes against other guys. In the meantime, Paladin told Ranger that the fighter had also contacted her with a new account and tried to influence her into talking with him again. But she blocked the new account after he started off with bad comments about Ranger. Several people on the server later said the same thing, and a general post was put online so that everybody knew whose account that was and what he was up to. That was after I left the server, so I didn't know that. I have to admit that most people on this server seem to be quite reasonable. This again didn't last for long. Fighter's will to constantly harass Ranger ran so low that he went back to only texting him once or twice a week to blame him for seemingly all of his problems. Everything from simple daily problems to all the problems he had with dating. Turns out eventually that Ranger did read some of the texts, but the reason was hilarious. For some reason, he and Paladin thought it would be funny to just play bingo with all the problems that Fighter was blaming Ranger for. I have to admit that this was an idea which would have never crossed my mind, but Ranger is the type of person to do something just like that. It went on like that for a long while, and now I was even more confused about Fighter's thoughts than ever before. Being angry for like a week or two, even if unjustified, that's something I can understand. But doing all of this for multiple years? Might explain why he had that many problems if he was still wasting so much time annoying Ranger. But let's get to the part that neither Ranger's husband nor I knew, which made the two of us laugh so hard that the people on the neighboring table in the cafe asked if we were okay. So after the last heated phase, more than a year had passed, and Ranger had asked his boyfriend if he wanted to marry him, in a good old-fashioned way as I was told. And of course, he said yes. Fighter's text had not stopped, but Ranger completely ignored all of them in the weeks leading up to the marriage. He wasn't even sure if Fighter actually sent messages at the time. Their big day was finally there, and judging by the pictures, it was wonderful. But guess who showed up after the ceremony right after the two guys were already happily married? If you guessed Fighter, you are right. Ranger's husband didn't realize any of this since he had no idea who Fighter was, but Ranger saw him. Someone from Ranger's family took a picture at just the right angle to see Fighter's face. I have never seen someone more surprised than the Fighter was in that moment. My only assumption could be that he never actually realized that I was not Ranger's boyfriend. So in the end, Fighter seemingly showed so much entitlement that he dared going to a wedding with the presumable aim to crash it, only to realize that Fighter was marrying someone entirely different. That was the moment that Ranger's husband and I started laughing and couldn't stop for multiple minutes. It was just too absurd. I had no idea that someone could be that crazy, but turns out someone was. The good thing about it was that Fighter didn't do anything and left shortly after. This was the last time that Ranger saw or heard anything from Fighter ever again. We all hope it stays that way, so yeah, hopefully that's the end of this story. I hope you also got a laugh out of it, and thank you again for reading. End of story. Okay, I know that this is a serious situation and years of stalking and harassment isn't something that should be taken lightly. But there is something so funny to me about the idea of Fighter having a Dinkelberg-esque relationship with Ranger. I'm just imagining that Ranger's just sitting there minding his own business, reading his DMs on Discord when he suddenly gets a message that reads,
Ranger, you son of a bitch! I know it was you who left the packaging on the sourdough open and now that motherfucker's gone stale!
Suffice it to say that this man is on a whole other level of unhinged. Y'all are amateurs. This man has gone pro. Ranger's in a tough situation here. Of course, going to the authorities is the knee-jerk reaction. But in a surprise twist that shocks no one, the government failed to work as intended, and Ranger was left to fend for himself. But it seems like Soldier Boy here wasn't all that bothered by the idea of having a vengeance-obsessed stalker, which is a level of unbothered that I hope to reach one day. All jokes aside, situations like this one are ones that absolutely need to be taken seriously. You can't rely on the assumption that someone like Fighter is going to continue to act rationally, because they have more than demonstrated that the word rational is not in their vocabulary. If you ever find yourself in a situation like this, be sure to take all possible precautions to keep yourself and your loved ones safe. Social media purges, security systems, firearm and self-defense training, whatever. Because while Fighter had a lot more bark than bite, not all stalkers are gonna be built the same. And it only takes one guy being built extra wrong to make playing D&D really hard for you in the future. But you know who are all built exceptionally well? The artists who send me fan art. That's right, how about we take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art comes from viewer Adam Art and displays a scene in which a drow bard desperately attempts to entertain the Drake in an attempt to distract his simple mind, while the rest of her party steals the loot. She might be surprised to discover that he's pretty hard to please. Play Wonderwall. No. Okay, how about Wonderwall?
No, I can't play.
Well, okay, fine. If you're gonna be that touchy, I won't even bother with my next request.
Is your next request Wonderwall?
No. But if you could play Wonderwall, that'd be pretty sick.
Sir, this is a harp.
Thank you again, Adam Arts, for submitting your art. If you'd like to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and send in your fan art. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.